What's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter. Today on the show, we're talking about UFC Vegas 91. It's Matheus Nicolau taking on a new emerging challenger in Alex Perez, right? He was supposed to take on Manel Cap, the rematch, the anticipated fight. Instead, we got this rematch, this fill-in fight of sorts. But what we do have is a guest that you guys are knowing, waiting for, expecting to hear from. He's back in the building. Rich, how are you today, my man?
Very good, bro. Feeling good. UFC's back. 300 was a sick card, man. But yeah, the week off wasn't good at all. So I got a little bit of a list before we start. So I need to apologize for 300 because I just dipped out. People wanted to know the reason. Couldn't be asked telling everybody. I just couldn't be asked, man. Like, the 4 people panel show isn't for me at all. Like, it's the waiting around. And I think we were just kind of like hashing on each other's stuff all the time. So yeah, I think it's like a patience thing. And my battery on my laptop was going to go before the last 2 fights. So I would have dipped anyway, man. And you had people to keep it covered. So it's not like I was ditching you and leaving you solo. So that settles that. I'm not doing my podcast anymore. Just can't be asked. Lack of motivation, whatever you want to call it. So I will start it again when I can be bothered in the near future. Who knows when? People leaving comments, man, on the videos about my style of giving the breakdown. Liam's the one who gives you the in-depth shit, the stuff you need to know, the intangibles. You know, this person's been doing that. All I'm going to tell you is who I think will win and how. So they're going to be brief as fuck. And that's what works for the show. I don't know whether you agree, but it's like yin and yang, man, bouncing off each other. When you watch the UFC, you want Joe Rogan, who's color, and then you want someone like Dominic Cruz, who's going to give you the analytic side of it. And it works, man. And that's what we do. So when you're in the comments, man, like, shut the fuck up. You don't need to keep going on about, oh, Rich, all you do is say this guy's shit. I cleared 17 units on UFC. And not on bullshit. It was on money line stuff, Kayla subs, stuff like that. So just pay attention, listen, and tail, man. Stop chatting shit in the comments. And finally, what was it the little fucker did, man? Yeah,
I love it. You came armed with facts and notes and evidence today. I love it.
I got one more, bro, and I need to say it because he's a little fucking bitch and like smearing my name. Dan Levy said that I unfollowed him because he did that medic pic of me. I thought the medic pic was funny as fuck. I commented on it. I unfollowed Dan like 3-4 weeks ago. He just hasn't realized till now. And then he makes him post about me. He's a bald cunt. Fuck him. Done with him. He lied. And that's my shit, man. So let's move on. Going to give you some winners. It's a great card, man.
Fair enough. And obviously, you know, I have a long-standing relationship with Dan. I still love my guy, Dan Levy, but I love everybody, as you know, Rich. So I always wish everybody well in their online beefs and brawls, but we're going to just keep it positive. But much love. As you guys know, if you're new here, my name's Liam. I'm going to pick fights on this channel each and every week. And if you're new to Bets and Banter, we start at the bottom of the show and work our way on up. So without further ado, guys, let's get it rolling with the first fight of the night. I think that my guy Rich has a prop of the night that he posted on this fight. So why don't we kick it off to you first, Rich? You've got Maheshate Hayisaer. I think Maheshate is just like the ring name for this guy. I think he kind of just drops the other name. And then Gabriel Moggly Benitez. He basically dropped Gabriel. It was Moggly as far as I was concerned, but it's an interesting fight. You know, Mowgli's obviously the older guy, a little experience, on the UFC level, but really not against high quality opponents. So I think you are expecting a Maheshate win. How do you think he gets it done here, Rich?
Yeah, it's nothing super controversial. Maheshate. See, I said it, guys. I'm learning. I got the Asian fighters' names correctly. Maheshate, KO. Plus 140, I think it was. It's binary, man. Benitez is here on 8 days' notice. He's old anyway. I just think it's a cash grab, man. Simple as that. I think the steroids for Maheshate are going to win this fight. He's just too big, too strong. He originally had Jubilee. That just tells you everything you need to know. The UFC was setting him up for a win, getting back in the win column after the KO by Borishev, I think it was. So, yeah, KO, and I'm high on it, man. Probably round 1. I think, yeah, he's just too big, too strong, man.
Yeah, I think that Maheshate is probably going to win this fight as well. I don't count out Moggly completely. I think he's got some skills. We have seen Maheshate get clipped before. The one thing that stood out to me, just from like a long-term standpoint, I always track these things like a nerd, but like if you look at Maheshate's run, I think he's 2-2 in the UFC, and he's been an underdog all 4 times. So you've been making money back in Maheshate. This is the first time he's been favored in a UFC fight. So I found that interesting, but also you got the short notice opponent, guy who's a little bit older, guy who's been getting knocked out a lot. The other thing I would note is just like he almost has like a deceptive record in terms of, rarely getting submitted, right? He got submitted by Jim Miller last time out, but Billy Quarantillo is like on his back with a fully locked in body triangle, just punching him so many times that the referee like felt like, all right, I got to mercifully intervene in this spot. So Pepe's asking in the chat, is the club and sub not viable? I do think it's viable, but I also think that Maheshate is like not very technical with the grappling. I think he's probably going to try and swing it out here and like land shots from on top. But I do think like, as I say about virtually every fight, anything is possible. And I think that Maheshate is probably going to rock Moggly at some point. I think Moggly can be just like horsed around physically. I think he's got a lot of technical skills, but I think the durability is going. I think the movement, the speed is going as well. And those are kind of things that you can't lose based on his style, his skill set. So I'm going to take Maheshate here as well, but it's just a spot for me where I think he's got a lot to prove, and I think he can do that here, but I'm not going to lay the chalk price. So I think finding that plus money angle, maybe looking for an ITD. I don't know what that price is on this fight, but I think that Maheshate probably wins this.
Yeah, I thought about the club and sub, man, but there was one fight, I can't remember which, he KO'd the guy, and he rocked him, and the guy was scrambling on the floor, and he had all the opportunity to get the grappling going and just didn't want to know, man. So based on that, I'll take the KO, man.
There you have it. And I think that, he's a young enough guy that you could expect some improvements, but it's just like, this is a really violent individual. If you watch his fights, like even the fights that he's lost, he's gone out there and thrown hands with everybody and been willing to trade in the pocket and be really violent. So I understand where you're coming from there. Next up, we've got Ivana Petrovic taking on Liang. And admittedly, this is a fight that I have yet to tape. There was a lot of tape that I wanted to do this week. A lot of these fighters are not super familiar to me. But, just looking back at the past results, the only time I ever bet on a Liang fight was the Ariana Carnelosi fight. I laid the price with Carnelosi in that spot. She was able to finish her in the second round. But this is the biggest underdog price you've ever seen, I think, for Liang in the UFC, which I find really interesting because Ivana Petrovic obviously has skills and talent, but came into the UFC, loses her debut as a favorite, and now she's a much bigger favorite. And obviously Liang has exposed herself for not having great cardio, kind of rushing her fights, but she does have some physicality. She goes out there and gets takedowns in the early going in a lot of these fights and gets into wild boxing exchanges where it looks like they're kind of 50-50, and she's been on the wrong end of those, but she's also been expected to lose these fights. So for me, it's kind of just a spot where I'm like, is she really less likely to win this fight than she was some of the other fights she's had in the UFC against a little bit more established girls? I don't know about that. And Silvana Gomez Juarez, like her only positive attribute as a fighter is that she hits like a truck, so like she went out there and landed a huge shot on Demopoulos, and then Demopoulos finished her from the guard. But like we've seen that she has a lot of power in her hands. So this is a interesting spot for me, but like WMMA minus 500 on a debutante, a sophomore outing, when the girl kind of, phoned it in and gassed out last time. I don't know. Didn't really seem compelling to me. I think it's Liang or pass. How about you, Rich?
Yeah, I kind of agree, man. I do think you can find a angle on the, what's her name? Petrovic side, because I do think she finishes. I think it's the same as the other fights Liang's been in. I think eventually when she doesn't get a sub, she will give up. Of course, she's live for an armbar. And what would concern me playing the Petrovic side is the fact that she initiates grappling, man. And I think that's all she knows in her game. So I don't think she knows how to fight any other way. So, it's going to be risky because she's going to initiate in the grappling, giving Liang all the opportunity to hit a sub. But Liang's trash, man. Even the fights when she had a bit of success, like the JJ Aldrich when she got on top, she did nothing with that time. Like the way she hunts for submissions, I don't think it's like high level shit that she's doing here. And then you go and look at a record prior to the UFC, and the girls she's getting these arm bars on, man. They're 0-2, 2-1 type girls. So I think she's going to be 0-4 in the UFC. Liang, she gets cut. And Petrovic lives to fight another day. But I'll say one thing. This is probably her only winnable fight in the UFC. Both of these girls are really trash, to be honest. But yeah, we can always pick a winner, man. So yeah, I'll go Petrovic, KO, grind and pound. I'll go for that.
The one thing that stands out to me is like I do have a couple like long-term angles that I look for, and Na Liang is listed as the younger fighter here by 2 years, and she's had a ton of professional MMA bouts, and obviously most of them were low level, but even in these fights, like she's had moments against most of these girls that she loses against in the UFC. So I just feel like a lot of it's to do with composure, huge steps up in competition. Like that's the kind of thing that you could settle with a little bit of experience. It's not in front of a huge crowd. It's at the UFC Apex Center. Just seems to me like a kind of fight where we could see a little bit more parity than people are expecting. But, obviously this could also be the last fight for her on a 4-fight deal. She gets finished again, and then they just, ship her back and say thanks anyways. But it's just a spot for me where I think that, Na Liang is like fighting for her job, last fight on a contract. She needs to win this fight or it's all over for her in the UFC. So I think we're going to get her best effort, whatever that looks like. And Petrovic just doesn't strike me as a girl who's proven minus 500. But I get what people are saying. She's never won a fight of substance. I think that's all fair. But just like going out there and taking down JJ Aldrich, like, Lipsky hardly did that, right? And like she's a competitive fighter in a more meaningful fight on this card. She was able to do it late in the fight on some counter takedowns, but like it's just the kind of thing to me where I find Na Liang interesting at plus 400 or so, but we'll see how it goes. Next up, I haven't bet anything on the fight, to be clear. Next up, we got James Llontop taking on Chris Padilla. This is another short notice booking. We had Llontop scheduled against Lando Venata. Then we had Llontop scheduled against Gabe Green. So a lot of cancellations on this fight card, but now we've got this matchup to deal with. How do you, unpack this one, Rich?
Yeah, I've usually got a rule, man. For short notice debutantes, I like to fade them to get subbed. I don't know whether I'm going to do that in this circumstances, just because this Llontop guy isn't that great, and he's a stand-up guy. I was going to fade him twice. I had Gabe Green. I actually bet that. Venata, I would have had Venata as well, probably, and probably finish. But in this one, I like him to get it done. The short notice, I know they're both making their debut, but I just think that this Padilla guy is just happy to be here. We've seen it many times before. They're good for round one. They're strong. Then come round two, that's when they get finished. So yeah, I'll look at round 2 free submission, because I'm sure the prices are going to be wild. But yeah, I like Llontop to get it done. That's the short of it, man.
Yeah, I was watching Llontop tape right before I got on the air, and I think that he looks all right. He has been taken down. He's been able to find a way back to his feet, but I'm not sure exactly what the level of competition has been like prior to, the Contender Series. And on the Contender Series, I think I bet Trevor Peek by knockout against Malik Lewis. I wasn't really sold on his game and what he brought to the table. So it didn't surprise me that he was able to win that fight. And now I'm looking at a spot here where I did watch some Padilla footage as well. And I watched a fight that he had back in 2016. I think he was like 20 years old, and he's out there swinging bombs. And honestly, he almost finished Jason Gonzalez, who's a pretty quality fighter. And that for me was like, kind of interesting, because he seems to me like the kind of guy that the UFC likes in terms of the style. Not in terms of like, we're going to book this guy for title fights or something like that. There's a reason he's had 20 fights before he got to the UFC. But when you look at like how he approaches the fight, like he's going for finishes. He's trying to put on like a show and take people out of the fight. And recently, I think he's gotten a little more serious about like, I need to win these fights. Like it doesn't matter about the, I'm having the funnest fight of the night and this stuff. Cause you realize eventually like, oh, now my record doesn't look so good. Now I'm not getting signed to the UFC. I'm not getting my goals. So he's on a 3-fight win streak. He's used a lot of takedowns over that time. Take people to the ground late in the round, take people down, beat them up on the mat. And I think that that's, a good style overall for winning fights, for mixing things in. On short notice, is he going to be able to, work that game? I'm not sure, but he does have like another way to fight, right? Like this has been the new thing to get these 3 most recent wins. Like, hey, go out there, push these takedowns. He'll always attempt a takedown or 2 in these fights that I've watched from the regional scene. But what I noticed is like in some of these older fights, like he's not really concerned with getting the takedown. He's just trying to kill somebody, and he's throwing elbows to the head and he's throwing knees to the body. But he does seem like he slows down over the course of the fight. And especially body work is something that could get to him. So I think that on the Llontop like scouting report, he should be going for body shots here early and often. He should have the better preparation, the better gas tank. So to your point, late finishing opportunities should open up. But I feel like this is going to be a really violent fight. I feel like both these guys kind of invite that violent exchange. And, at 155 pounds, 2 guys swinging leather, both of them, somewhat experienced now at this point, almost 20 professional fights. Like it just seems like it could go a lot of different ways here. So great fight. I'm interested in seeing this one play out, but I feel like, let me look at the prices here for a second.
Just to add some things as well.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Padilla was getting ready for a fight against Gonzalez. They were having a rematch. So it's not like he's coming off the couch. I don't know if people knew that.
Yeah, I knew that he was preparing for a fight. I think it's like 4 weeks or something from now that he was supposed to be having that fight. So obviously an abbreviated camp, but he was in camp. He was preparing. And I'm thinking to myself, like that fight with Gonzalez, like it really could have went either way. It's a great scrap. He seems like a guy who's like kind of 50-50 in some of these fights that he's lost. So that does make it interesting for me. I think that Llontop late or Padilla early, because I do think that, both these guys are making a debut. So could you see like an underperformance from Llontop? I think it's possible, but he did fight in the Apex before. The other thing I'll mention is like, it's normally really select crowds that come into the Apex, right? Like it's very small. I think that this guy is a Las Vegas local, and a couple of these shows that I've been seeing, like there's like Padilla chants and like taco chants and all these things. So I would not be surprised if like the Apex was popping off for Padilla a little bit. That's just one thing to keep in the back of the mind, but it's for me, probably a dogger pass money line. I mean, I'm a little bit surprised to see plus.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
To be honest with you, because I'm poking over now. There's not props available on this fight yet, which is normally how I like start my breakdowns. Try and glean any information I can get from the bookmakers that way. But yeah, I think that this is a fight that's more competitive than the line indicates. But I think the later it goes, the more it favors the favorite. So interesting scrap though. Great fight at 155 pounds. I think that among like short notice replacements, you could do a lot worse than a guy like Padilla. I think he's been experienced, beat a UFC level guy in Justin James. So hey, fuck it. Let's see how he does. Next up, we got Ketlen Souza taking on Marnic Mann. I've listened to a bunch of breakdowns this week, Rich. I don't know. I think that you have a different approach than I do. Like after I start to get my own reads and like write down like what I have an initial opinion on, then I move on to like, all right, let me, source some information. I know there's a lot of people that are sharp that do their research. So I'd like to make sure I didn't miss anything. And, I haven't heard anybody talk about the fact that I thought Ketlen Souza got her knee absolutely destroyed, in her last fight. And maybe she looks fine. Maybe she looks like herself, but like, I'm just hearing a lot of like, yeah, she should go out there and whip her ass and like all this. And I'm just like, coming off a knee surgery, like Casey O'Neill was favored -185 against Lipsky. And I thought that she looked like, timid and also like didn't have the same strength, didn't have the same drive. And that's to be expected, right? Like even just like naturally, like how much confidence somebody has to like put weight on it to go after, their own attacks, to use bouncy footwork and things like that. It's just awkward when you're coming off of a knee problem. And so I didn't look into like whether she had a surgical repair in the aftermath there, but that Z-lock looked absolutely terrible. You don't see those very often. You hardly ever see it, but it didn't look like she had like a submission where she could continue to crank it and apply pain. It looked like she like destroyed things and just like let go, when she tapped because she got her knee popped. So it's like not a great look for me. Do I believe in Marnic Mann as a long-term prospect? Not really. But the thing that I will point out is her husband is a pro MMA fighter. He's a BJJ purple belt. Seems like they're living the fighter lifestyle. So are they coming from a great gym? Are they like, at the highest level? No, but like they're training to fight, I think, year round, putting in work. So I do think that this is a more interesting fight than than some of the like records and whatever would let on. I think Ketlen Souza is a way higher level prospect than Marnic Mann, but I just want to see it to believe it coming off of the knee injury. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it, man? Like the 3 fights that we just mentioned, literally the dog could win in any of them. That like live dogs, man, everywhere. And I really do think a dog will win in one of the 3 bouts. It's just, choosing wisely. But yeah, everything you said, man. Marnic Mann could win this fight. She did get her knee fucked up in the last fight. How is she going to be? They're both small as fuck. Marnic Mann's only 5 foot, man. Fucking tiny. I don't understand why Souza's dropping down in the weight class, to be honest. I don't see how it's going to give her any advantage, really. I think she just got scared off from the last fight against that cunt girl. And, just because of the way that went, she feels like she needs to drop. But, yeah, I think she was all right at 125. Basically, in terms of a pick, I'll go Souza to get it done by decision, but very hesitantly. I don't know, just lesbian power, man, stronger. Marnic Mann, she just seems a bit too soft. I just think in transitions, Souza will end up on top and Mann will just be happy to throw up triangles and not get it and, lose minutes on the clock. So Souza decision for me. Souza decision for me, but with no confidence whatsoever. But there are some fights later on the card that I do have some bets on. But yeah, these openers, man, these are trash, these prelims, to be honest. But yeah, Souza for me, man. Official pick.
I think that we were doing all right. I think the Llontop fight, especially like it's on its 3rd iteration. I'm like, you know what? For their 3rd try, this is okay. The Liang and Petrovic fight is pretty dire. Maheshate and Benitez is fine. So we're 50%.
But that's shit. Let's be honest. That's shit, but I'll take it.
Indeed. Hopefully we make some money, or at least pass on the ones where we would lose money with our read. So God bless. Next up, my man, we got a heavyweight scrap where we've got Don'Tale Mayes, Lord Kong, taking on Caio Machado. This is a heavyweight bout. Why don't you kick us off here, Rich, with the talk of the Twitter streets, the lines going back and forth, the little tug of war action. How do you feel about this one? Any action to report?
Yeah, I had to laugh, bro, on the last one when you were saying, about our processes. You like to watch some podcasts and stuff. That's the difference. I don't think there are any sharp people on MMA Twitter, literally. The only podcast I've watched this week was John Stargarian, Club and Sub, and I managed to last like 10 minutes before I had to turn it off. But yeah, in my opinion, I don't understand the Mayes love. Everyone seems to be on him. He was a consideration for the mush. I think Machado wins it. Just because it's going to be a heavyweight shit show, some, cage pushing. I think he'll do more. I think he wants it more. He's already took in his L against Parkin, and I think he gets back on track. And even a finish, maybe, man. That wouldn't surprise me. I think he's got some fast hands. I think he could catch Mayes with something. I just think Mayes is just mid and just meh. When I go on Instagram, he's playing COD in his spare time and fucking smoking bud, which is fun and everything, but it's not someone I want to be laying my money on. So, yeah, the second mush of the week is Mayes. I'm going to go for Machado, man. What do you reckon?
This is a fight where I do not have a very strong opinion. When I wrote down my thoughts at the beginning of the week, I wrote down over 2.5 and fight goes the distance, just as like a gut feeling here. The thing that spooked me is like, number one, Machado just went to decision. So like whenever a heavyweight is like coming off a fight that went to decision, I'm always like regression. Like I'm waiting for it. Like my boy Yanni the Greek, shout out. But when I'm looking at this matchup, like I'm not a Dante Mays guy. Like I'm like a never Mays guy. I feel like that's like my approach to betting on these fights. I just think he's a bonehead, right? Like I think we talked about the Hamdi Abdelwahab fight beforehand, and I was like, Hamdi doesn't have a lot of fights and he doesn't look all that good. But looking back, like he had an amateur win over Greg Velasco that I kind of missed. And now he's suspended, obviously, for doing all the roids, but shout out to him. When you look at a guy like Dante, I do think he's been like a career letdown. Like he has some athletic abilities. He's huge. He's long. And aside from the Arlovsky knockout, like he just seems to me to not really impress. And on the other side with Machado, I said going into Contender Series, I thought he was like the hardest guy to evaluate because like you can only fight who they put in front of you. And like there was no one in Canada that was anywhere good at heavyweight. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I just mean like they're dragging Lee Meehan out there twice to fight him in his 50s. It's like they clearly just didn't have better candidates. And now he goes out there against Mick Parkin, who's another guy who's like a young contemporary. And, he loses that fight. And I think that it did show there's a path to victory against Machado. You get him a little tired. You start putting him on his back. Hey, it's heavyweight. Like, what do you think he's going to do? Show some great guard game. But he is a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I believe. Would I be stunned if he was able to get on top of Mays in this fight? No, I would not be stunned because I've literally seen Mays get taken down by like going for the worst, attacks of all time and just flat backing himself. So Mays is kind of a bonehead, but he could also like either guy could implement takedowns is the bottom line. I don't think either one of them is like a sophisticated defensive grappler with a lot of nuance or something. And if one of them ends up on top of the other one, I think it's very likely that we could see a quit job or we could just see, somebody going, hey, I won this round. I'm going to hold on to him chest to chest in the half guard and not move. So that's why I lean towards the over 2.5 and the goes to decision. I feel like most of what we'll see is negation, two guys spinning along the fence line. But the reason I didn't end up playing anything here and feeling really passionate, it's just like I could see it ending up a really quick fight if either one of these guys gets on top of each other. So yeah, for me, I don't want to have a Caio Machado ticket and watch him get power humped in the face by Dante Mays like he did to Josh Parisian. That would be maybe the worst way to lose a bet, I think. But in addition, I'm just not a Mays guy. So if I had gotten plus money on Machado, I probably would have considered that. I think that was a reasonable spot. I don't want to lay the chalk though to find out in a kind of greasy low level heavyweight fight. Any closing thoughts there, Rich?
There's some good points, man. And I agree. It probably is whoever can get on top first, because I'm sure Mays will try to initiate the grappling also. I just think Machado is a bit slicker, man, with it, to be honest. And yeah, I can totally see Mark Smith saying, fight back with Machado on top. And he's literally thrown like 4 punches and he gets carried away and it's just stopped prematurely. But yeah, also Mays, look at who he's beat, man. Like you said, Arlo, that wasn't impressive. Arlo's been done for a minute. Parisian and what was that guy's name? Rocky Martinez.
Martinez, yeah, not a stellar.
He was like 4'5", bro. He's a midget and he just got took down. So yeah, Mays isn't nothing special, man. And yeah, like I said, second mush of the week, man. Let's go Machado.
Yeah, I think that pure pick, give me Machado as well. But I don't think it's like an easy call, but give me Machado. Next up, man, we got Austen Thud Hubbard taking on Michael Figlak. And this is a spot where I said on my first look, I have to do more tape on Figlak. And unfortunately, that is still true. But what I can say is I'm not passionate about the Austen Hubbard side. I had thought that I would potentially get to an underdog play here. And I still think I would only take plus money in a matchup like this because I can't trust Figlak. If you're getting out-grappled by Perez in the UFC, I have some severe questions about where you're at. But is that a debut stunt? Is that like, hey, I came in and it was a high-pressure situation for me. I underperformed. I could do better in the quiet confines of the Apex Center. Maybe that's the case. But it's also, I'm not in Europe anymore. I'm flying out to the Apex. I got to do, a training camp, for a fight in the US. And last time out, I got out-grappled by a French guy who's not an elite grappler based on what we've seen in the UFC in terms of results, right? Like Terrence McKinney just did whatever he wanted on the mat to him, right? So then you look at Austen Hubbard and, he did get hurt by his opponent last time out. And who was it again? The guy who just won the Ultimate Fighter, Kurt Holloway. No, Holloway.
Oh shit, yeah.
For Thud Hubbard. But yeah, I know what you're saying. But when you're looking at this guy, like I haven't been impressed with Austen Hubbard's like overall body of work. Like sometimes he gives it up a little too easy. That Selecki fight, for example, like I thought that was going to be a bad matchup for him because he gives his back constantly in like grappling defensive situations. And so maybe that's still a concern here. But I thought that he was doing all right in the grappling in his last fight until he got hurt on the feet. And then he kind of fell apart. So he's 32 years of age. He's not a young guy. He's not a guy with a lot of marketability. He does seem to me like a guy who's kind of just like, you know, just there to be there, to go out there and have a scrap. I think he's kind of like, you know, 50-50, like, you know, I'll see how it goes. If it's my night, it's my night. If it's not my night, it is what it is. So those aren't the kind of guys I want to put my money on. Even though he's a slight underdog, like I would need bigger plus money, I think, to get to the Thud Hubbard side. But again, it's probably just plus money or nothing for me on a fight like this because neither guy has really impressed me with their overall body of work. But I just think Thud Hubbard's a little bit more tested at this level. And what we saw from Figlak last time just really left a lot to be desired. I thought he had a better run in Cage Warriors than what he showed in the cage. But, you know, you got to produce something before I want to trust you at a 65% indication in a UFC fight against a guy who's been here a lot longer. Next up, my man. Or excuse me, what do you think? Any closing thoughts on that one, Rich?
Yeah, just don't bet it. Stay away, man. It's like a lot of fights on the card. Just stay away, man. It could go either way. I'm making allowances, you know, for his debut. Ziam, yeah, you know, he shouldn't be getting out grappled by him, but he's a big fucker, Ziam. Maybe he caught him off guard. Jitter's got him. Who knows, man? So yeah, it's just question marks everywhere, man. Don't bet it.
There you have it. Neither one of us feels like we have a great grip on this one. I will probably put out some content tomorrow after the weigh-ins, and I will have taped it by then. You know, I'm going to have some thoughts on the tape for the Patreon later as well. So that's something that I'm still working on today. But there's a lot of tape, like I said, that I was digging through for this card. And this is one of the matchups that I put on the back burner because I don't feel like I'm going to end up with a bet on it one way or the other. But I'll do the tape like always and just see if there's any edge to be had. But it's definitely lower on my priority list. Next up, we've got Yahya in the bantamweight division, 135 pounds, taking on Victor Henry. This is a battle of the old guys. How do you feel about this one, Rich? We'll let you kick it off.
I like Yahya, man, despite the age. But then you look on the other side, like you were saying, Henry, man, he's getting up there too. And basically, you know, it's funny. I've always looked to fade Yahya by KO over the years because, you know, he's getting up there in age. He's very one-dimensional in his approach. We know he just wants to get people down, backpack them, and get the submission. Finally, it hit with Montel. I'm probably still down over the course of the time I've tried to fade him, but I learned my lesson, man. I was thinking about Henry by KO in this one purely because I think, you know, if we look at the Barcelos fight, Henry's got volume, pressure. He might not have the hardest, you know, punches, but he's up there in volume, and you know he's got decent jiu-jitsu. He could keep Yahya off him. But then when I was looking into it further, man, I switched sides. I'm on Yahya. I'm on submission. I did look at decision. It's plus 700, but so is the submission. So I'm on submission 700, and I just when I watched the tape, I seen Henry. I can't remember the names, man. He was getting fucking taken down quite easy by people, man, and controlled. And then I watched the Sunsao fight, and it's just night and day, like the performances he puts in sometimes. I think it depends on his opponents and what they're giving him. So, yeah, the short of it is I think Yahya gets his grappling going, maybe gets the submission. Obviously, I think he does because I bet it. But yeah, I think round 3 will be a bit of a sweat if the submission doesn't come. I think that will be Henry's round. But Yahya, when he's fresh, man, you don't want to fuck around with him. You know, back in the day, guys like him, Formiga, they were motherfuckers, man. And I think he's still got it. We can forgive the Montel KO. Montel's a fucker himself, man. He's a big fucker. Biggest hands in the UFC, all that shit. So, yeah, official pick and bet. Yahya submission.
There you have it. You know, I feel like fool me one time, shame on me. Fool me twice, won't be fooled again. I looked into Victor Henry before he came to the UFC, and I loved what I saw. Like, he's just a guy that's like after my own heart. Like, he's out in Japan, just like with a pro wrestling guy and Josh Barnett, doing the damn thing, having these fun, crazy fights, doing grappling matches, all this stuff. And he's high pace. He goes out there, scrambly fights, all this crazy stuff. But like, that works against a certain level of fighter. And it could be met with a harsh reality sometimes when you step up in your level of competition. And I think that that's kind of what we saw against Asuncao. I thought that Asuncao was old enough that, Victor Henry was going to go out there and probably finish him. Like, I thought he was actually going to submit him in that fight, which, later on, what was it? Davey Grant was able to do that, right? Or something. It's like, when you just look at the way that fight played out, like, Victor Henry's a guy that has real skills, but he just like takes the fight that you give him. Like, he's willing to go out there and do whatever and like have a fight, and the Basharat fight, I was on Victor Henry. Why was I on Victor Henry? Because I was fading Basharat as a system play, which we cashed on our guy, Ayman Zahabi. Shout out, friend of the show. But then in addition, right, the thing that I look at is like, how can this guy justify the price? And I'm like, Victor Henry is a really hard guy to justify a huge price tag against. Why? Because he's going to throw 100 significant strikes in the fight. Even if you're on top, he's going to like just look for short shots. Like, he's a stingy fighter. He's been around a long time. He's a savvy guy. He's had guys trying to grapple him for a long time. But at 36 years of age, you kind of are the guy that you are, right? He got kicked in the nuts so hard that he needed to like take some time off. From his last fight, right? My man got blasted. He's sitting there with swollen testicles. The referee's trying to convince him that he's fine and to continue. So for me, like, I think that Pepe actually just hit the nail on the head. I was about to get to this point, but he summarized it in one simple sentence. Every Henry fight, the underdog has been massive value. I think that's true, except for maybe the Gravely fight. Right. And I think that I don't even know if I bet Victor Henry, but I thought he was going to beat Gravely just because like I trusted him to do more correct things over the course of 15 minutes. And I didn't think Gravely had the chops to finish it. Yahya in the first round has the chops to finish a lot of guys, right? He's very, very skilled with the jiu-jitsu. The question is, can he get the takedowns? The problem is, it's like Victor's been taken down by every UFC opponent. A lot of his regional opponents took him down as well. So it's like, that's not really a question, right? It's like, he's probably going to get taken down. Then the question becomes, okay, can he get back up? Can he do it safely? I think that's an open question, right? It's like, so yeah, for me, man, I tend to agree. I think that Victor Henry is a really sound fighter, really skilled guy, really impressive. And so any opportunity to bet him at plus 450, I'm probably going to be there, right? I was there for that first fight when he came to the UFC, plus 425. But now it's like plus 300 on Yahya, who's, 3 years his elder and very skilled and has a lot of wins and has a lot of credibility still. The one thing that scares me is Yahya is probably closer to retirement. Like, I think Victor Henry is like a little bit more, about what he's doing. But would it really surprise anybody if at some point Victor Henry just moved on to pro wrestling or just like doing something else in life? He kind of just seems like a guy who's cut from that cloth. He's got a lot of different irons in the fire and seems like just a really down-to-earth guy. But Yahya is like, been about that life for 25 years. Please go ahead, Rich.
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. I just looked at my notes. Who has the most submissions in bantamweight history in the UFC? Anyone?
I'm not sure, but it's probably Hani. Just off the top of my head, I can't think of somebody who would have had more.
It is someone, because I watched his fucking interview and I can't remember it. So if someone watched that interview as well and can put it in the chat, that'd be good. But Yahya and somebody else are like tied or something for the most subs. And if Yahya gets this sub, he's the bantamweight, sub god.
Sub leader. So then he'd have something to fight for. I absolutely love it. I'm looking right now, Rich, as we speak. So I'll have that figured out for the time that we discuss the next fight. But why don't you kick us off on Tim Means, Uros Medic, as I find our answer?
Yeah, I think Tim's going to get slept in the first round, man. I just think, the younger fighter's going to win. Medic, he's a kickboxer. He's pretty good at it, man, when he's not fighting decent people. I just think Tim's done, to be honest. He's had some favorable matchups or some matchups which were winnable for him. Just Medic by being younger, faster, more hungry. I went on Tim's Instagram. His missus has given birth or had a surgery or some shit. He's coaching wrestling. He's got outside endeavors. We've spoke about it about other people, properties and all that shit. So yeah, does he really need fighting? Nope. So I'll take the Ali Sleaze guy in Medic to knock him out round 1 or 2, man.
There you go. So I have the answer for you, and I think it'll make sense when you hear it, but it's Uriah Faber, actually. The king of the guillotine, the front headlock master, Uriah Faber, was able to get it done. And you see that there's a couple other guys, that have now left the weight class, like an Aljamain Sterling with 4 submission victories. Marlon Chito Vera has 4 submission victories, but most of these guys no longer active in the UFC. Pedro Munoz has just 3. Ricky Simone has just 3. Said Nurmagomedov 3. Mario Bautista 3. So a couple guys that are still chasing and still active, but a lot of these guys aren't even part of the picture anymore. So Yahya, if he can get this one, might be able to hold that record for a while. So great note from you, Rich. And now we've got Narrative Nation as well. Fascinating fight. And I think it's a really good one. This is the kind of matchmaking you want to see. I feel like between these older vets, I thought the Basharat Henry fight was kind of a scumbag move. I think this is a little bit more reasonable because both guys have a path to victory. I think Yahya kind of gasses off like a cliff after 8 minutes of a fight, and then he's on death's door. So he might be winning 8 minutes of this fight and then start being in cardiac arrest. Oh, goodness gracious. All right, we're good. I thought I had to sneeze, and we made it past it. But I think that if Yahya is able to bank some early minutes, we could even see a draw here, Rich. I don't know if you think I'm crazy, but just the way that these guys fight, Yahya sometimes sells out in the first 2 rounds, and then round 3, my man is holding on. He's just trying to find any way to make it the last 5. So Victor Henry doesn't strike me as a big 10-8 guy, but he did buzz Barcelos a few times. Because he landed so many shots. Eventually, if you just land 100 punches, something could just clip somebody when they don't see it coming. But we're back to the Tim Means and Uros Medic fight, and I'll give my thoughts on this. I agree largely with your sentiments that Uros Medic is a guy that has real skills. I think that I've done a great job betting Uros Medic fights. I'm going to give myself an old pat on the back, right? I've done a shitty job betting a lot of people, but Uros is a guy I've made a lot of money betting on his fights. The only bets I've ever lost on an Uros Medic fight are Jalen Turner round 3 at some, huge plus money number. And I can't even remember the other, but I had him huge against Omar Morales at plus 120, I think it was. I just thought that was a great spot for him. Younger guy, way bigger. Like you said, he's a great kickboxer, right? So Omar Morales is a mediocre kickboxer. I felt at the UFC level, he's great regionally and those things, but just when he stepped up in competition, I just felt he always fell a little bit short of the other talented kickboxers he would fight. So I was man, that's a great spot for Medic at plus money. But when he fights somebody that could wrestle, that could grapple, I'm fading him, right? I bet Mirtabek Oralbai, he's a lightweight, right? He's going to be fighting at UFC 301 in the 155-pound division, and they fought at 170 pounds. I know that Uros is a former 155, but he's staying at 170, right? One guy left, one guy stayed, and he was easily taking him down for a lot of that fight. You saw a little bit more willingness to try and work his way back up to his feet. But he said in his interviews this week, I was panicking because I didn't spend any time training for wrestling that camp. The whole camp was just dedicated. Hey, I'm going to be kickboxing. I'm going to be on the feet with this guy. And I think that Tim Means, he wants to go out there and have a slugfest. That's what he says. That's his desire. But that lasts so long, right? If you start getting hit with big shots, most guys start to wrestle just in life in general, they're oh, you know what? I should not stand here and keep getting punched in my face. I should try and grab a hold of him. And I think that both these guys are probably going to have some crazy exchanges. The one thing is, like, I wouldn't be too surprised if either one of these guys mixed in the grappling. Uros said something that stuck with me, which was like, I've been working on my wrestling for this camp. Like, now you're not going to catch me like surprised. Like, I'm going to be ready. I'm going to know to wrestle this camp, like how to do it and whatever. And so for me, like, a lot of times you see these fighters like to prove a point. If you know what I'm saying, Rich, like it might just be like sprawl brawl, keep it upright. Like when Means reaches for the single leg, push him away and punch him in the face. Like maybe that's it. But it would not surprise me at all if Uros Medic took down Tim Means, because the other thing is, like, Tim Means just is a really tall, long guy. Like, he knows how to wrestle. He's not incompetent with the wrestling, but I always liked wrestling those tall, long guys because you have access to their legs, and also you can take something and pull it by you. You could just use their limbs as levers. So I always say for the submission grappling, limb length is a great thing, but for wrestling in particular, a lot of stocky guys have success. And so when I'm looking at this kind of fight, man, the bottom line is I feel like Uros Medic, younger guy, closer to his prime, making some improvements, had a couple brutal matchups in the past, the Jalen Turners, the Mirtabek Orobais, but again, getting out grappled systematically by lightweights. And Mirtabek Orobai, I really like him as a prospect. He's still unproven, right? He's still got to go out there and show it a little bit more at this UFC level for us to know exactly where he's at. He's done it on the regional scene, looked great. He did it in a UFC debut, short notice, looked great. But does that tell us that he's great, or does it tell us Uros Medic is really suspect in the grappling? Because we saw against Jalen Turner, guys, Jalen Turner has been summarily out-grappled before in the UFC by the likes of Renato Moicano, Matt Frivola. You could go through the list. There's been a number of guys. And when we look back at that fight, he took him down because they were having some competitive moments on the feet. So to your point, it's like, yeah, this guy, Uros Medic, if you're standing on the feet, it doesn't matter who you are. Even Jalen Turner, big guy, strong guy, hits very hard. He was like, yo, maybe it's better if I just take this guy down. But then when he did, it was so easy. Like, he just took him down and like easily is doing whatever he wants. He's like pushing his head down, wraps it up. I was like, man, that's not a great look. Because against Brad Riddell, Brad got rocked and then caught in the guillotine by Jalen Turner, and it was all in one sequence. Uros Medic just got out grappled. Like, it looked like he had no idea what he was doing. So I think that if I'm in Tim Means' corner, I would be like, hey, listen, Tim, I know you want to go out there and bang. Don't fucking do that. All right, go out there and shoot a takedown on this kid, put him on his ass, and see if you can make him uncomfortable, because he admitted that in his last fight when he got taken down, he started to panic, and that's what made him so tired, right? He got fatigued against Mirtabek, and Mirtabek is 155 pounds. Say whatever you want about Tim Means. He's huge, right? He's a big, long guy, and he is a wrestling coach. So if he gets on top of you, he's probably going to be pretty heavy and just try and hang out a little bit, make you tired. Both of these guys have been submitted a ton of times in their career. So that's the one thing that just comes to mind for me. It's like, it is like a fight where everybody's expecting somebody to get knocked out. Both guys are talking like, hey, somebody's going to get knocked out. But I just have a feeling like it's going to be a war. It's going to be back and forth. It's going to be blood and guts. And then somebody's going to shoot into, a guillotine or something like that. So great fight. I do think that there's potential money line value on Tim Means, but it also might be the perception of value. The one thing I'll say, in weight classes like 170 pounds, where guys get knocked out at a pretty decent clip, where guys can get hurt, rocked, wobbled at a pretty decent clip, over 38 years of age, the rate at which people get knocked out just skyrockets. Tim Means is up there at that age. So he's had a great chin historically, but he's had 50 professional fights. He's 40 years of age. So I do think that the knockout is on the table. No doubt about it, Rich. Great fight, though. I think it's good matchmaking here as well. Interesting, compelling, and it's kind of the right test for Uros Medic, because Tim can mix it up, but he also is a guy with not great cardio. So neither one of these guys is a lock to be like, with a perceived cardio advantage in round 3. I feel like that could go either way. But the one thing I'll say is Medic, when it was just kickboxing against Semmelsberger, for the most part, he did look better in round 3 in that fight and was able to get the highlight reel finish late in that spot. So, interesting fight, and I'm looking forward to it. I think Uros probably gets the job done.
I got a feeling you're going to bet either by submission, man.
Hey, who knows, man? Anything is possible. Next up, we got another fight where I might bet either guy by submission. Jonathan Pearce taking on David Onama. And it surprised me. I'm going to give you a thought right off the bat, Rich. I'm going to give everybody the sharpest chat in the game. One of my thoughts right off the bat here. Did it not surprise you to see Pearce, according to odds makers, right? Like, the odds on the KO are lower than the submission, which I just find baffling, right? Like, David Onama to me seems like a guy who's very tough, who's very durable, who's willing to take a shot. And Pearce doesn't seem to me like a guy who's got great power, like a guy who's very likely to, TKO the vast majority of his opponents. He can get to some good wrestling situations, but it just seems to me like he's going to have to submit more often than not to finish his opponents, especially a guy like Onama. I guess they're thinking like, hey, round 2, round 3, maybe Onama tires out, and it's just like an accumulation of ground and pound shots. But for me, I haven't been impressed by Jonathan Pearce's cardio in the deepest fights, right? Like by the time it gets to round 3, he's mostly spent a lot of his energy. I even feel like that Brito fight, he started to do a lot of talking and whatever, but the reason he couldn't hold him down wasn't because he was talking. It's because he was starting to fatigue, right? Like he was talking, because he was projecting some confidence. He's in a good position, but if he was not fatigued, I think he would have just held him down there. I think that in that spot, like it kind of showed Pearce is a little bit of a bonehead, right? Like a fight where everybody expected him to do well. Hey, he should have this wrestling and grappling advantage. I mean, Bill Algeo, right, is way less strong than Pearce, like less physical. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but like he was able to take down Brito and exploit his wrestling over time in that fight. He just gassed him out a little bit. And I know that was a debut spot for Brito, but then you have Pearce like kind of using that same game plan, getting to some of those same positions in the second round, and he blows it. Like Bill just stayed solid, kept good positions. He blew it, man. It was a really bad look, I felt. But Brito's a dangerous guy. Ray's dangerous in every position, and his grappling is better than Onama's, no doubt about it. But the thing for me that makes Onama a dangerous grappling threat in his fights, it's just that he's really fucking strong. Like he's physical, dude. Like he could just squeeze the hell out of somebody. And I think that especially if he hurts you, if you start grappling when you're not sober, you're doing the rock dance, you're spinning a little bit on your feet, and David Onama grabs a hold of your head and arm together and squeezes him, I think you're probably just going to pass out because he's a freak in terms of his strength. So it seems to me like a fight where I could see either guy winning. But for me, I like Onama's durability. I like the dog in him. I think that Pearce is kind of a bonehead. Talk me out of betting David Onama, Rich. What do you think?
I wouldn't be comfortable betting either money line, man. I actually like either by submission here. I was surprised at that, to be honest. I hadn't looked at the numbers yet, but I would have expected Pearce submission to be lower than the KO. I do think most of the time Pearce is, a grinding type guy who just wants to hunt for the sub. So if he was going to get a TKO, it would be from mount. And I noticed he's been subbed a couple of times. I go and look at Onama. He's got a couple of subs on his record, a few guillotines. We know, GSP is going to fucking try and take him down. And it's going to give him all the opportunity to hit the gilly. So I actually like this fight either by submission. I haven't looked at the line. Haven't bet this fight yet.
Me too, man. That's how I started my breakdown. I was like, another fight I like the ends by.
What's the number? Do you know?
It's like a little over 3-1.
That's good. That's good.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, I haven't seen every book take it to market yet, so that's why I've been kind of like sitting on my hands for some of these. But that was something that I noticed as well.
The one thing I'd say is I don't think it's fair doing the comparison of Pearce and Algeo against Brito, and purely just because I think they just fight differently, man. It's funny to say it now because Algeo just lost by TKO, but usually he rides the punches well, man, which is what he did with Brito, and obviously took the punishment round 1, then like you say, weared on him. But Pearce, he doesn't have good head movement, man. He's a bit of a punching bag sometimes. So I think that just made him forced to takedowns more, where Algeo was like, all right, you wear yourself out, try taking me down. I'll just loosen your grip and, do the right things.
You're right. Algeo's a way more confident striker. That's a great point.
But based on this fight, man, I'd lean GSP, ASP by submission. But I wouldn't rule out the submission on the Onama side. So I'll look at the numbers and see what's the smart play there, man.
Hell yeah. The other thing for me that kind of stood out is like, I think that Onama is definitely live for a knockout in this fight. Like, because of your points that you just made. Like, the other thing is you have a guy in Onama who I thought competed well when he was at 155 pounds on short notice, right? And then you got a guy in JSP who's like against C-Rod when C-Rod was actively competing at 135. He was able to grease out that win, but like the same round 3 C-Rod was like still a problem for him as well. And he was getting beat up a little bit late in that fight. He almost got guillotined in that fight as well. He did get front headlock choked and finished by Brito. I don't think he puts his head in the right position oftentimes when he's grappling. Like, he's very good at grappling, but like he's got a long ass neck. And I think that is like his flaw at times. It's like his positioning with the head. He's always looking for the takedown. So the one problem with sticking your head and neck forward all the time is that then people can try and plan like, all right, I just need to latch onto this guillotine and I'm going to be able to put this guy in danger. And I think for Onama, if I'm his camp, I'm scouting that and going like, hey, like, let's just make sure that if this guy goes for a takedown and leaves his neck out there, we at least put the threat in his head. So he goes, maybe I should be more weary about shooting these takedowns on this guy. So great spot. Shout out to Dixon in the chat. Says, Liam, do you remember Elkins versus Bektic? This fight is going to look exactly like that. Crazy comeback late by Onama. I think that's very possible. I think that we've seen Pearce allows people to come back on him. That's a fact. But on top of that, like, we've seen Onama fight to the bitter end. Like, him and Nate Landwehr had a fight of the ages, like just going out there, both rocking each other with huge shots, both going back and forth. And Onama kind of spent his gas too early in that spot. Thought he had the finish, but what we saw from him is like he never quit on himself, even in a fight that got insane and crazy. And like, how many guys have quit against Nate Landwehr or broken or gotten outworked? I just felt like, that was a fight that could have went literally 50-50. Like, if he wasn't a minus 300 favorite, we talk about, man, what a great fight that was. I think that this is a spot where Onama can get back on track, but Pearce is not a bad fighter. I'm just not a Pearce guy. I never was. I think a lot of people are higher on him than I am. And I thought Brito was a tough matchup for him last time. So I don't think the UFC is really doing him many favors either. I think they've been giving him pretty hard fights. And I think Onama is another example of that. Like, this is not a, if you're looking for like guys that are just like super easy to muscle around and beat up on the ground, like, maybe Onama is not as technical as Pearce, but like, I think he's going to be more physical, pretty substantially. So that's the way it is.
Where's he from, Pearce?
Let me check. He's somewhere in the U.S. Fighting out of Fight Ready in Phoenix, Arizona, but he is from Johnson City, Tennessee.
Oh, is he? Is that by West Virginia? He seems like a West Virginia type of guy.
It's a little further south. It's a little further south. But, man, I will say, Tennessee, lovely state, great fried chicken, nice people. But, Pearce certainly has a personality all his own. I will tell you, that's one of my favorite UFC moments of all time. Get up and do something, boy. And then Brito just gets up and does something right then and there. That was an all-timer. Almost as good as Moicano and Demir Hadzovic, when he just tells him, I wanted to keep fighting, but then you shouldn't have submitted me. But in any case, man, we'll move on. Shout out to Anato Moicano, UFC 300. Oh my God, we're knocking things over. Take a bow. Anato Moicano, what an absolute fucking soldier. Took the beating in round 1, came back and let him have it in round 2 for his first career TKO win.
Oh.
They tried to tell you Anato Moicano is not a good fighter. I wasn't sure who was going to win, but I will always give him credit where it's due. He's beaten good fighters before. He did it again. Shout out to him. Greatest moment in UFC history.
Bro,
but
it was. What about Diego Lopez, man? Diego Lopez is a motherfucker, man. The way he's come on the scene, that's got to be like fucking.
I'm embarrassed I haven't made more money on this guy because he's literally everything I like in a fighter, which is just like go out there and kill them in the first round. Why wait 3 rounds if we could get it done in 2.5 minutes, right? It's like he just went out there and brutalized him in every position so fast. And like, where are you safe with this guy? It's embarrassing, Rich, because I bet on him the only time it didn't work. I bet him plus 680 against Evloev. And if they booked that fight again and he was plus 680 again, I would bet it again. And like, it's not going to work out more often than not, but like at plus 680, it doesn't have to, right?
I don't think I've ever bet on him, man.
Dude, we got to start finding our spots with Diego Lopes because this guy's on the rise. But I know that you've got something to say about this matchup, so I'm going to cue you up for the heavyweight feature bout of the evening. We've got the UFC debutant Jhonata Diniz. He comes from the kickboxing scene, a Glory veteran. He fought Rico Verhoeven in his heyday. He's now taking on Austen Lane, the NFL standout. I'm kidding, of course, the Jacksonville Jaguar. He is a guy that's been on a little bit of hard times lately in the UFC, but he does have UFC experience under his belt, so that could pay dividends for him here as he returns to the Apex. Rich, what do you got?
Yeah, so this guy, what's his name? Diniz. He's mush of the week. I think Austen Lane's going to win. And it's funny, man, that you just mentioned the Rico thing, because when I put it out as mush of the week, that was the only negative comment I got. Someone said, oh, that's smart. Fade the guy who went 3 rounds with Rico. And to be honest, when I was looking at Tapology to see, you know, how they've won, who they've beat, and see what they're like, I completely missed it. I didn't even know that he fought Rico, to be honest. It was that far down on his fucking record. It was like his second fight or whatever. But I couldn't give a fuck, man. It means nothing. It was back in the day. It was in Glory. He lost the fucker. You know what I mean? It's on the tip of my tongue, man. But there was something recently where someone did the same thing. They were giving credence to a guy because he had 2 fights.
It's Cesar Almeida against Alex Pereira. Although I will say, I have brought that up too. But I have specific like things that I mentioned about that fight, which is like he grapples with him in that fight. Like they like both are like pulling each other around in the clinch, and he wasn't incompetent there. But like I agree with you that like just the fact that 2 guys fought doesn't really tell you much. It's like, what did you learn from the fight, or like what can you take from it? I think that's important. But good point. That was the guy you're thinking of.
Yeah, and I wouldn't have thought it, man. When I watched the Dana White Contender Series fight for this guy, I fucking couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was like, really, this guy is -300, -400. He was getting touched up in points in that fight. Yeah, it's his like UFC, you know, quote unquote debut Dana White Contender Series, but he didn't impress me. Didn't strike me as someone with elite striking. We know what Austen Lane's about. He's nothing special either, but I know he didn't grapple much in his last fight. It didn't last long enough, but he can hit some blast doubles, man. He's a big fucker. He's like 6'6". He's got some experience. This guy's making his official UFC debut, so who knows how he's going to fare with that, you know, the jitters and whatnot. So I'm looking for a mush. I was toying with Medic. There was a couple of considerations, but yeah, we landed on this guy. He's like 6-0, making his UFC debut. Undeserving of the price tag. So yeah, mush of the week, man, for sure.
Yeah, he's also getting 90% of the Tapology votes here. So in terms of like, you know, public sentiment, I think everybody's expecting Diniz to win this fight, myself included. You know, if I could just level with you, Rich, like I think that this is a fight where from a betting standpoint, my long-term fundamentals say like you just don't lay -250 on a heavyweight debutant. Doesn't matter. You know, like there's no bet on this fight that like jumps off the page at me like, wow, this is great. The one thing to your point, I have in the past, I think, bet like Austen Lane fights to end by sub at like 10-1, you know, based on the same rationale you just gave, right? Like the guy is a football player, like he knows how to tackle somebody. We've seen it in MMA fights before. Like he can get guys to the ground. He's normally violent there. Like he's looking for punches and stuff like that. I think that on the feet, you know, he's awkward. Like I don't like what I see from the guy on the feet. He's got power, you know, he can move a little bit. He's not a spastic guy, right? Like he has athleticism, but he just doesn't seem like a very fluid striker to me. And that's the problem I have against a guy like Diniz. Like I think they tried to give him a guy, I'm talking about Diniz, like they tried to give him a guy that he can knock out. Now that doesn't mean that it's going to work, right? Like again, Lane can get on top of him, change the complexion of the fight. But I think that TG actually hit on an interesting point. He said Lane fights like he's scared to get knocked out. And I've always kind of felt the same way. And that Tafa fight, I thought was like where it was going to be make or break. Like Carl Williams is a more consistent wrestler, but he's also a guy that's like, you know, less athletic, less dynamic. He doesn't finish anybody. And he was able to take down Tafa, right? Like routinely. and it wasn't always easy, right? He had to take some damage in that fight, but like he was able to show those signs of success and like, you know, just like go out there and work a functional game plan. He uses the tools that he has to the best of his advantage. And I just feel like that's not always what we see, you know, from a guy like Austen Lane. Like, and the one thing I'll always say when I talk about these former football players, it always concerns me a little bit. Like Cody Garbrandt, former football player, and people say his chin's gone and he's like 32 years of age, right? And he also did like boxing. He did a lot of things, but like, then you look at Greg Hardy and these guys, like, I do find that a lot of the football players have taken a lot of concussive damage over the course of their life before they ever get involved with fighting sports. And I do worry about that. I think about the same thing with like Volk is an elite fighter, a great fighter. But if you ever had to criticize like one thing about his game, he was a little bit chinny, right? Like Chad Mendes rocked him bad. He got knocked out in his only career loss prior to the UFC with the head kick. And it was, I believe, in part because he played rugby for a long time. Like some of these guys just have a fresh chin. They've never been hit before. They can take all the damage that they take in the octagon and in practice. But other guys, like they've already spent a lifetime getting hit. And the only saving grace is Diniz has done the exact same thing, right? He's been fighting the best strikers in the world in stand-up fights, in heavyweight fights for a long part of his life, right? So when you look at that sample size, you're going to say, man, you know, this is like a guy who's serious about fighting. But the other thing to mention, and this is the other thing I think that is a really important note, Rich, Cesar Almeida, like 2 years ago or last year, fought the guy who is the current or like most recent middleweight champion of Glory and like fought him to competitive decisions multiple times. So like the fact that he fought Alex Pereira was like an interesting bit of color, and the fight itself like showed you like, man, this guy moving around in the clinch, like there was like a half a guillotine attempt. These guys were like really just out there scrapping. But then you look at like the more recent fights with Wilness, I think his name is. I'm just like, I'm not a kickboxing guy. I'll never fucking pretend to be. But like, I remember I did all this work and this tape and the research, and like he fought this guy who was like still like at the top of the kickboxing world and fought him fucking close. So I was like, this guy is like a fucking serious kickboxer. Diniz, most of the credible names on his resume were earlier on, right? Like now he's kind of been fighting just like a little bit more, you know, local scene and whatever. But I do think that as far as the MMA portion of this fight is concerned, I wouldn't be surprised if this fight ends up on the ground. It's two guys that are both like sloppy heavyweights. And so those fights could always end up on the ground. But for me, I think that Lane has more upside if the fight is on the mat. He's been doing it a little bit longer for a MMA fighter. He's got a little bit more experience, might be a little bit less panicky in those positions. But for me, I think that Diniz is the guy they're trying to set up here, and I think he's going to get the job done. But got to disagree somewhere. So there you have it. I do think that, like I said, money line side, I think is the dog here in Austen Lane. And I considered some props on both of these guys, but the Austen Lane knockout is like 3.5 to 1. I was honestly disappointed by that price for an underdog of this price. You know, like
yeah, I agree.
Seems to me like I'd much rather take the money line at that kind of number, because I think what if this just turns into a disgusting decision where Austen Lane tries to hump him against the fence? Because honestly, like if I can't take down Diniz, what would my next best strategy be if I'm Austen Lane? Hump him against the fence, because like you do not want to exchange blows. I feel if you're Austen Lane in open space with this guy, unless you're knocking him out. Because the longer that happens, the more chance that Diniz, who actually knows what he's doing, does the right thing and kills him, I feel. That's the way I feel about it. Oh, please go ahead.
Do you know what it is, though? I literally think if you was to fight this Diniz guy and they started you on the floor with you in mount, he won't get up. He'd get submitted. I think one takedown and it's done. I think with Lane on top, he ain't getting him off him. He ain't getting that big fucker off him from mount. He's going to ground and pound him. He's either going to give up a choke or, take the ground and pound, man. I think he's a white belt, double white belt. I've seen it a little bit in the Dana White Contender Series fight, man. There was a moment where he almost got taken down and he looked like fucking Casper, man. He was scared as fuck and white as a ghost. So, yeah, I think the takedown is going to come and then the fight's over shortly after. But yeah, agree to disagree, man. See what happens.
He was doing his Greg Hardy versus Marcin Tybura face where he's like,
yeah,
he literally was at his first jiu-jitsu trial class. It was unbelievable.
We know.
But great stuff, man. we can move along to this featured bout of the evening. We're in the women's flyweight, I want to say. Let me just double check that. Yep. No fake news here. We're in the women's flyweight division, and this is a fascinating fight. This is a fight where we've seen some line movement. I'm going to go ahead and, you know what? Let me pull up fight numbers here, and we'll get the correct best fight, or excuse me, the correct best odds for each of these fights pulled up on the screen. But what we have is about a -150 +125 split on this fight. The last time that I checked, in terms of like what the market is like typically pricing this at. And you're looking at a -150 price on Karine Silva and a +125 comeback on Ariane Lipski. And now I'm looking at the fight numbers, best available prices on this fight. And what we have is -144 Pinnacle Sportsbook for Karine Silva compared to +130, the comeback on Ariane Lipski. That's at BetMGM Sportsbook. So yeah, like I said, about that -150 to +125 type of distribution here. And Karine Silva has been nothing but a money printer so far in the UFC, like just going out there and doing the job that she's expected to do. She was a favorite, I think, in all of her fights so far. If my memory serves, I think she was lined close at open on a couple of these fights, but closed like -125, -150. I think on the Contender Series, even bigger favorite because I bet her ITD at like even money. I bet her by sub in that fight at +350. And now she's, a lower price to win this fight by submission against a woman who's never been submitted in her career, a pretty lengthy career at that in Ariane Lipski. So I found that interesting right off the rip. I also found it very interesting that the KO for both of these women is being priced very short, right? To me, that did stand out. Like when I see women's KOs priced like 4-1 and lower, I'm always like, man, it's kind of interesting, right? Like you don't see that very often. And when I look at, the OnlyFans fade, Dixon has been coming in and out, right? Charlie Campbell sent the OnlyFans fade to hell, but definitely, it goes back and forth. What I will say is this, I've rewatched a lot of Ariane Lipski footage before the show today. That was one thing I wanted to make sure I did because this fight is like one that everybody seems fired up about. So I wanted to try and have an opinion to share with people and like try and have something to offer. When I looked at this, man, what stood out to me is Ariane Lipski has definitely been getting better. She's not always the most confident in her striking. Like she likes to strike, but sometimes she's just like a little bit hesitant and her corner's like on her, like, please throw more, like, please, like, take a couple breaths at the beginning of the round and then get on her because she lands a lot of successful shots when she's throwing. Like when she attempts offense, it looks good. She's landing the right hand. She's landing the head kicks. She's putting body kicks, serious work in on these women. And here's the thing that I think has made a huge difference, Rich. When she's been going to defend takedowns recently, I think there's been a little bit better anticipation from her, just a touch. Like I think she's not perfect at it, but what she does is now she digs an underhook and then she throws a hard knee to the body. And she's been doing it in her last 3 fights constantly, like rip knee to the body, rip knee to the body. And I feel like it's been paying dividends for her. When I'm watching how she's been defending the takedowns. Now, the problem for me with like passionately backing Lipski is it's not in the far distance that we've seen her, on the wrong end of fights with Antonina Shevchenko and these low-level girls on the ground that, frankly, she has no business losing to. Montana De La Rosa, was able to just horse her to the mat. So I think that Karine Silva has real upside as a prospect because she's strong, she's physical, her jiu-jitsu is very good. But her striking, I do think, is like a little bit of a work in progress. I don't think she manages range very well. And Melissa Gatto landed way more shots than Lipski over the course of the fight. Like touch. But Lipski was just landing more serious shots because she was committing to her offense. She was boxing with a little bit more intentionality, and she was stuffing the takedowns. And Gatto's another girl who's strong, physical, was able to work a little bit in the clinch. The other thing I'll mention, Rich, is I don't know if she has a judo background. I actually want to look into like what her specific martial arts background is, but there's been a lot of judo throws in the recent fights from Ariane Lipski. She's not only been defending a lot of these takedowns, she's been ending up on top. Kind of like Manon Fiorot, she's been like, trying to use the pressure of her opponents. Like, oh, you want to pressure into me? Then take this ride and like whizzer kicking them over. And she's been doing very well with that. So I've been impressed with the Ariane Lipski run of late, right? 3-0 as an underdog in her last 3 fights. It's nothing to sneeze at. But on the other side, Karine Silva hasn't really given you a reason to doubt her. You know, she's gone out there and delivered in all these fights. The problem is, I just think that if this fight gets extended, you know that Ariane Lipski can fight 15 minutes. You know that she can go out there and kind of press that advantage late. And we normally see her pick up the volume later on in the fight. Shout out to Art from Fighting Stats. I just watched his video as well. After I did the tape, I watched his video that he did, and he talked about like, Lipski throws a bunch in round 1, kind of tapers off a little bit in round 2, and then picks it up in round 3. And so Karine Silva normally comes out really hot in the first round. I think that some of the angles I looked at on this fight were Silva by KO. I mean, it's like you got a girl who's never been subbed. She's been KO'd in like all of her losses, especially in the UFC. She's just getting TKO'd from the top position. Karine Silva, is she a nice girl? Is she out there like not trying to beat people up? No, she's trying to hurt people. She's trying to beat people up. And I think that she'd be more than happy to beat this girl up if she was able to sit on top of her in the mount. I do think she's the more technical grappler of the two, but I've just seen enough improvement from Lipski to say, like, I can't get behind the chalk prices on Silva. I get if you got in on Silva at plus 110, I salute you. I take my hat off to you. I think it's a great bet. But for me, the ABCs, shout out to TG, says always bet on cardio. Lipski, definitely the more proven cardio, in my opinion. And also, I think that Lipski is like the more proven striker. So it's like she checks a couple of these boxes for me. They're the same age, right? They both have had a lot of professional fights. So they both are kind of like where they're at. But the last thing I'll mention here, Rich, before I kick it to you is, sometimes fighters just like have a run of success and like it's attributed to nothing, right? Like, if they had fought those 3 fighters at any point in their career, they would have won. So it was just like happenstance. But she changed her training camp, right? Like there was actual like substantive differences behind the scene. Lipski was like, hey, I was doing this thing. Then I started working with the Lioness Studio. Her husband is a professional fighter, right? Like he's like a black belt in one martial art, a brown belt in the other. Don't quiz me on it, but I have all this information somewhere in my notes. It's like, this guy is like pretty serious fighter. Then they're putting her with men as like her sparring partners. She's like sparring with men, practicing with men, wrestling, grappling with men. So she's getting a good feel in terms of strength, physicality in the lead up to these fights. And I thought that she looked more confident in the more recent fights, the Aldridge fight, the Casey O'Neill fight. She was coming out there like ready to go and aggressive. The thing that I'm worried about is if you place a bet on her pre-fight and then you look at her and she's like looking at Karine Silva and shaking across the octagon, because Karine Silva is a scary woman. Like she did a lot of damage to Ketlen Souza's knee. She went out there and fucking squeezed the head off a couple of these women. Like when she gets a hold of something, she puts people in really embarrassing finishing positions, and she can be extremely deadly. So it's a fun fight. It's a fight where it's a rare, fight not to go the distance, chalked out in WMMA. And I'm really compelled by this matchup. I'm going to watch more Karine Silva fight tape today to try and figure out her striking game and see exactly how it's going to play off of her opponent. But for me, it's dog or pass here. If you got the early dog money, great job. If you take the dog money late on Lipski when it peaks out, I kind of understand that too. But it's a fascinating fight for me. And, that's it. Yeah, I got to do a little bit more research, but fuck, there's my thoughts. Rich, what do you think?
Yeah, it's funny, man. You're saying that, like, if you got in early on Karine, well done getting the dog money. Glenn mentioned it in the chat as well, but I disagree with that, man. Like, yeah, you got dog money, but she's fucking shit and she's gonna lose, so you've lost your bet anyway. So what good's plus 110, plus 115? I think Lipski should be.
Well, you could get free money, in fairness. Like if you get plus 110 and then it flips all the way to plus money on the other side, you could just arb off for profit. But I see what you're saying. Like if it's a losing bet and that's not your strategy, you don't arb or take, plus money on both sides. Like, yeah, that could just be a losing bet, but please continue.
If you're able to arb, if you got Karine at plus 110, it's not going to go the other way. The lines are not going to move that much where you can arb off and make something unless you're betting thousands. Anyway, forget that. Lipski should be minus 200. She's going to smash her. I don't know why people in the chat, I just had a look on Lipski. I haven't seen much on Twitter about this bout, to be honest, but she ain't subbing her. I don't see it anyway. I think the days of her, getting a sub every fight round 1 are over. It's time to take an L, man. I went back and watched that fight against the I was going to say it, but I'm not. I'm going to look at her name. The Asian girl she fought. I'll say that.
Kui Yan or something. Yeah.
I'll say the Asian girl she fought. It was disgusting, man. I think it was an opportunistic finish. Prior to that, man, I think she can be bullied. I don't think she's up to much in the stand-up. In fact, I don't think she's got fucking any striking that's going to worry Lipski. I think Lipski's going to smash her on the feet. Took it all, man. Money line, KO, plus 550. Fuck that, plus 300 off. ITD as well, just in case, because Lipski can catch an arm bar all day. She's got some decent subs on her, man. And we've seen with that Carini bitch before, man. She's been subbed twice. One was by armbar by Morose. You know, who's Morose, man? Nobody. So I think she's mid as fuck, hyped up. Yeah, and I think it was lined, probably lined correctly originally, just purely because of like how their recent bouts have gone. But Lipski's got 9 lives, man. I remember when she came into the UFC, I was betting her pre-UFC, man. But I remember when she came, I thought, yeah, you know, she could be a title contender. She's got the name, she's got the looks, you know, queen of violence. She's pretty and marketable. And then she just started losing, man. Like that ground game deficiency she had. But I don't know, maybe Dana was touching her butt or something because she had 9 lives. She's still here. She's been given more chances than most people. I think she's finally hit her stride. Like you said, I'm not going to rehash it, you know, better training, etc., etc. And yeah, I think she can break into the top 10, man, and be a name that we're talking about. And yeah, Silva, you know, she's had these round 1 finishes. I don't think that's going to bode well for her, man. If you're used to, you know, knocking someone out or submitting somebody in the first round in your last 3 bouts, what's it going to be like when that doesn't hit now? What's it going to be like when fucking, you know, Lipski's giving her the 1-2s and stuff? She ain't going to like it, man. I think she's going to shell up and get TKO'd. So yeah, that's my hot take, man, for the card, Lipski.
There you go. And I agree with you. I do think, like I said, dogger pass situation. I haven't bet anything on the fight yet, but I also think the ends by are better than the individuals' methods, unless you're on the Lipski side, of course, because I think the Lipski sub is like 14-1 or something like that. You know, obviously that one's a little bit different, but like a lot of these numbers are very closely correlated. So for me, I do like this fight. I think it's fascinating. I will point out, you're making a great point. Like you just look at the recent run for Carini Silva, and it's been all finishes. Like regionally, she's 0-1 career to the decision. I don't think she's dead in a decision because anybody with a grappling path, you know, if they can get takedowns for 2 of the rounds and then not die in round 3, they could always win a decision. But I do think that Lipski, number 1, has some finishing upside, right? As she's shown in her recent bouts. To your point, she had a rear naked choke locked in. And then like, because O'Neal scrambled, she switched to an armbar. That was a really nice armbar as well. So Lipski has had good submission offense. It's just been her ground game. Like when she ends up underneath people, she looks like a fish, right? So it's like, if she can prevent that, she's going to look good, I think, in this fight. But she might still look like a fish if she ends up.
Depends who those people are.
For sure. The thing is, like, Montana De La Rosa and Antonina Shevchenko are not fucking, you know, admirable competition to be getting finished on the mat by. Like, I'm not saying they're terrible, but like, I bet her against Antonina Shevchenko, for example. So like, I thought Lipski like this. I was like, how could she lose this fight? I was like, Antonina fucking sucks. And she still lost, right? She was plus 140 that night and ended up losing that fight. So I think that Lipski is like a girl that should have like figured everything out by now. This is the last piece of color I'll give on this fight because I know you're going to hate it. She said, she's like, you can easily attribute my changes to one thing. I found Jesus Christ 3 fights ago. That is what she said. She said, I changed my life. It's changed my relationship with my husband. It's changed my training. It's changed everything that I do. So 1 for Jesus coming the way of Ariane Lipski, Lord willing. But
I did watch her interview, man. When she said it, bro, I literally said out loud, for fuck's sake. Like, yeah, no, but good for her, man. If it works for her, all good. I'm only half joking when I rip the piss out of that shit. But
that's why she doesn't have the same OnlyFans as Marina Moroz. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not even on that OnlyFans fade, man. Like you say, it's ups and downs, isn't it? Yeah. What I'd say is Montana, man. I've fading Lipski plenty, man. And I just think it was the metrics against Shevchenko. And then Montana, man. Montana's a decent wrestler when the other person hasn't got any wrestling. So, yeah, I just think she had some bad matchups, man. And I just don't think this Silva girl's of the same caliber to get Lipski down. Lipski sounded confident in her interview, like she had a game plan. You know what I hope happens? I hope Silva does take her down, lays on her in round 1, works for submissions, doesn't get it, because come round 2, man, she's going to be gassed, I think. She's a little podgy fucker anyway, man. She's got a belly on her. So, yeah, I like Lipski specifically in round 2 or 3, man.
I absolutely love it. We've got a great fight here on our hands, so I'm excited for it. But let's move along to the co-main event of the evening, Rich. We've got a fascinating fight. Ryan Spann showed up to the presser or whatever, the media event, wearing a Superman cape. So Superman Spann in the building, taking on Lex Luthor. Shout out to my guy, the numbers Mason, for that reference. Lex Luthor, Bogdan Guskov, is taking him on this week. This is the Anthony Smith trilogy. Bogdan Guskov looking to make it 3-0 for the Fighting Smiths. And meanwhile, Ryan Spann's looking to right the ship. I got to tell you, Rich, I'm not a Ryan Spann guy. To make a long story short, Ryan Spann was favored to win his last fight. And, what ended up happening in that fight? He loses a close and arguably controversial split decision to Anthony Smith, but he lost the first round pretty cleanly in that fight. He was getting landed on by a lot of right hands from Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith was looking like he was in the fucking, what's that arena? Lumpini Stadium. Like he's out there doing Muay Thai, like, checking kicks and shit. Like, I was like, yo, Anthony Smith is like suddenly not washed just because he's fighting Ryan Spann, and that's giving him confidence. I said before that fight, I was like, I think the reason the UFC booked this fight is because they've seen Anthony out there not looking like, he can fight anybody and win right now. And they were like, all right, who's the last guy he beat? Ryan Spann? Oh, he cleaned him up quick. All right, run it again. And Anthony somehow found a way to cling to life for 3 rounds there and make it to the decision. And when you look at that fight, what's so remarkable is that Spann busts his eye crazy in round 2. Like Anthony Smith's eye is closed. It's swollen. It's looking bad. His corner's like, oh, Anthony, you're all right. Like, stick with me here. And what did we end up seeing from Spann in round 3? Fucking nothing, dude. It was just like no finishing instincts, no aggression. Like the guy just like lets life pass him by. And you know what's interesting, Rich, is that he lost that fight via split decision against Smith. And it was vindication because the last time that he was favored in a UFC fight before that was all the way back when he fought Sam Alvey, long time ago, right? He went on a 6-fight run as a dog where he was winning some, losing some, but he was literally an underdog in every fight, 6 fights in a row prior to the Anthony Smith fight, including against Anthony Smith the first time they fought, where he fucking lost and got submitted in the first round. But then you look back, the last time he was favored, he was minus 400 against Sam Alvey. And he went to a split decision in that one too. So I'm just like, Ryan Spann has been like the definition of untrustworthy in his UFC career. I think he is the definition of a fighter who is less than the sum of their parts. No disrespect to the guy. I think that he's got real athleticism. I think he's got power in his hands. I think his technical jiu-jitsu does not look terrible, especially when he's on offense. The problem is he is a limited fighter, so he likes to either get the rear naked choke or the guillotine choke. He likes to land the big overhand right, or he just starts swinging insane looping shots and he goes crazy and loses his form. Right? He landed a beautiful jab against Dominic Reyes. Go find other examples of that in his fights. And most of the time, he's just swinging crazy. He panics. He just like loses control of himself in the cage. And then he submits to people elbowing him in the side of the head every third fight. It's like a bad habit of his. He's on top of Nikita Krylov looking all right. And then all of a sudden just gets triangle choke from the bottom in the year of our Lord 2023, things that just should never be happening in the light heavyweight division. So at a certain point, I just don't believe in him, right? On the other side, Bogdan Guskov, I won't belabor the point. He's not a great fighter. He's not a guy that's proven a whole lot. but it's a light heavyweight fight. I think these two guys are going to swing and bang like a bunch of insane savages. And this guy's been training with Sean Strickland. He's been training at Extreme Couture. He's been training with Walter Walker. He's been training with Johnny Walker. He's been putting in work for a long time. He's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm hearing everybody say he's a fucking zero on the mat. He's a nothing. What happened in the fight with Volkan Ozdemir? Let's revisit it quickly. Volkan Ozdemir took him down. He worked his way back up to his feet easily. He got back up. They're exchanging. Volkan hurts him with a big shot, takes him down again and submits him. Hey, God bless. It's a light heavyweight fight. It's his UFC debut. And for a lot of these guys, they're doing a UFC debut in the middle of fucking podunk nowhere on the UFC Apex card against some other Johnny you've never heard of. And that's the way that it goes, right? You got to earn your stripes. This guy, Bogdan Guskov, me and you both identified like, man, maybe the UFC sees something in this guy because they're plucking him from fucking obscurity and saying, hey, give him a big fight. Give him Volkan Ozdemir. And it didn't work out. He went out there. He put on a slugfest. He landed big shots. Volkan's face had some marks on it. Unfortunately, it didn't go his way. And he had that adrenaline dump. But then I look at it. That doesn't tell me he's a god-awful grappler. It tells me Volkan Ozdemir, who went, taking down Paul Craig into his guard and didn't get submitted. Like maybe this guy's just not bad at grappling. Like maybe that's just the case, right? Volkan's been training for a long time. The guy who submitted him is fucking Daniel Cormier, who's an Olympic wrestler, right? Just picked him up, took him to the ground, tired him out, rear naked choke. It wasn't great sophistication, right? It was just fatigue. It was exhaustion. So when I look at this, I say to myself, okay, Bogdan fucking Guskov, does he have wrestling and grappling upside here? Maybe. Ryan Spann gets submitted sometimes, right? Like just makes boneheaded decisions. I think both guys are capable of submitting one another. Are both guys capable of knocking each other out? I think absolutely that's the case. Are both guys capable of winning a disgusting decision? I think that's the case as well. So if that's the case, give me the underdog or I'm passing on the fight. I'm always looking for an opportunity to fade Ryan Spann. We'll be there no matter what. God bless and good luck. How do you feel about this one, Rich?
Yeah, you got it, man. It's dog or pass on the money line for sure. Yeah, I bet Guskov by submission in his debut. Then he ended up getting submitted. But he was 20-1, man. And from the tape I seen, he does have some decent jiu-jitsu. I do think it was just a case that it was his debut. He got cracked, Volkan. He was known for having his power, man. I just think he had some tough matchups. So, we can forgive him for that debut. And then, obviously, he got his KO in his last one. So, I think either by submission or I've just looked and I didn't even realize, man, he's 16-1 by sub, this guy. And like you said, Spann, he's flaky. He's a mental midget, the rest of it. I actually watched his full interview this week, which I've never done before. And I actually like him, man. He's a funny guy. He seems down to earth and stuff. He seems all right. But yeah, I don't know about this price tag, man. It's a bit off. So yeah, I wouldn't mind either by submission. See what that is. Maybe put a quarter of a unit on the 16-1. Guskov by sub. Like you said, man, Spann does dumb shit. How wrong can you be at 16-1?
So I have gone back and forth on this, Rich, because I think that where I'm going to end up settling out is on Guskov round 1. And the reason I say that is because I think that the sub is possible. And so maybe I'll end up sprinkling a little bit on that as well. But the thing that I thought about is if Anthony Smith were to hit for the cycle against Ryan Spann, he got the decision last time, right? He greased him on that. He got the submission the first time they fought. Bogdan Guskov, for his doppelganger, Anthony Smith, who he's here to replace, could go out there and just hit him with the ding uppercut. And I honestly think that Ryan Spann is chinny. Like, if you just look throughout the course of his career, he had Johnny Walker as good as knocked out. And he was also so rocked himself that he just fell into a takedown and got finished. It was unbelievable. So I think that he is not a very durable guy. He's dangerous and powerful, but I don't think he's very durable.
Anyone can fall, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that Bogdan does hit hard. I do think he has fast hands. So should be a really interesting fight here. And this is what's fascinating to me, though, Rich. It's like every time everyone was convinced last time, like Walter fucking Walker, this guy is the truth. And he's from the same camp. He was a minus 300 against a guy who was 0-4 or whatever in the UFC. But this guy, Bogdan, is 1-1. He's the biggest underdog he's ever been. And he fought fucking Volkan Ozdemir. Volkan would be favored against Ryan Spann. Am I insane? Have I lost my mind? So I'm just let's fucking live to find out.
Spann's like a Devin Clark. A guy that mid.
Oh my God. Yeah, he's been around forever. He's fought some good guys, but he's never beaten the good guys for the most part. His best win in his career is Dominic Reyes. And unfortunately, Dominic Reyes just got announced against Dustin Jacoby. He's probably going to get sent to the depths of hell again. And I don't want that to happen. That's just the way it is.
I didn't even know that fight was set. Fuck that. I'll take the head case Reyes, man.
But anyway. Something? Reyes could submit him, but in any case, we can move on from that. Reyes used to be a good grappler back in the day. People will forget this. I think he submitted Ozzy Diaz on the amateur scene. Yeah. Shout out to the numbers. Mason Guskov was training with his doppelganger. I saw that as well. Also, can you tell me this guy's not marketable? After his last fight, he's getting interviewed and he goes, DC, you're my hero. And then he's like, well, Bogdan, how'd you feel about the fight? And he's like, or how'd you feel about your first UFC win? He goes, I think first UFC win is better than sex. I was like, this guy's a fucking hero, dude. So I'm absolutely impressed by Bogdan Guskov. If not for the mic skills, for the fact that he's replacing Anthony Smith one day at a time. He's going to be a commentator soon as well. But here's the other thing I'll mention. International fighters that do not speak English always are a little bit hesitant to me because I'm like, does the UFC really want to promote this fighter? And when you look, Karine Silva had a translator and was, speaking Portuguese. When you look at the difference with Bogdan had an interpreter who would tell him what the question was, from his language or whatever, and then he would respond in English. Okay. So it was a little bit broken, but he was out there trying his best and speaking English. And I do think that from the matchmaking standpoint and the business standpoint, the UFC really values fighters that do that. So I know it's a silly little aside, but we always try and give you the little nuggets that other people don't talk about. And it's a fight promotion, right? And I think that this is an international, fighter that is out there trying to make himself more marketable to an American audience. So it's a interesting spot. And again, it's his second opportunity at a ranked fighter in 3 attempts in the UFC. I think that speaks to what they view him as, like a guy who's going to go out there, put on fun fights and really try and earn his way into the rankings here. Young guy, hungry, full of piss and vinegar. Anthony Smith doesn't check those boxes. So I think if he's still beating Ryan Spann, twice in a row, I can see a path for Bogdan Guskov.
Is he
without further ado? Yes, he is. Uzbeki, yeah. Becky, stand. I think also by way of Russia, because I think he fights with the Gore MMA team.
Yeah. Uzbekistan, Russia, same thing.
I'm sure they would disagree, but in any case, my man, we got the main event. All we'll do is some very quick housekeeping, guys. Just want to say shout out to Fight Numbers. If you guys are looking for a way to invest in your information, this is a very helpful tool for me right now. I'm going to give you guys the co-main event and the main event odds right here. We got the -190. I think that's over at BetUS for Ryan Spann, best available price, +167 at Bet Online for Bogdan Guskov. That number has been creeping down ever so slightly over the course of the week. And now we're moving towards this main event of the evening. So the Fight Numbers main event odds, we got -174 Bet Online for Matheus Nicolau taking on Alex Perez, +150 to come back at DraftKings Sportsbook. So guys, if you haven't already, drop a like on the video. Make sure you get subscribed to the channel. We're talking fights here each and every week, trying to break them down, give you guys a winning angle, a winning approach. And both of us are tracked third party, long-term, all the results, everything in the description down below. We'll give it to our guy Rich first for this main event of the evening. How do you feel about this matchup? Do you feel like there's any betting value? Fascinating. We don't often see these flyweights getting the shine in the main event of the evening, but because we're coming off that lull from UFC 300, I think they were trying to set up Manel Cap, in my humble opinion, for a big showcase opportunity. But instead, now it's Matheus Nicolau who gets his first UFC main event. He was in a rematch of a fight that he had won, but that was a difficult fight for him the last time they had it. Now he gets Alex Perez, total wild card, I feel, Rich. We've got Alex Perez coming off the Makayev fight, and that Makayev fight was very competitive. So now he's making a very quick turnaround. He said, I spoke to my nutritionist. She felt like I could do this. No problem. So that's why we're here. And I think that he's probably going to make the weight based on what I heard from him in the interviews this week. He said, I'm feeling great. And it's coming off easy. So the one thing that I like for Perez is the fact that he's getting right back in there. And that has been the hardest thing for him in recent years is getting activity, in the octagon. It's been one fight, year off, one fight, 2 years off. It's just not been anything you can rely on. Hard to know what somebody's going to produce in the octagon when they're not there. But now he's getting back in there right after a performance, gives us a little bit more to handicap. Rich, how do you feel?
Yeah, I kind of disagree on that point, man. I don't like the short notice for him, to be honest. And I just think it's funny, you know, before the Mokayev fight, we were all writing him off, laughing about him having an Akaye store, whatever it is, you know, outside endeavors. We wrote him off, you know, he's shit. And then in this fight, you know, he's, you know, not a massive underdog that you would have expected, I guess, because of the Mokayev fight. But I fully think that Mokayev was compromised in that fight, and it made Perez look better than he would have. So, yeah, based on that, coming into this fight, I think Nicolau should be a bigger favorite. Yeah, just to make it simple, Nicolau submission plus 300, that's the bet. But Perez as well, making the weight. You know, I watched him back in the day, man, in the early days, him and Carlo Esparza, they're both from Onama. And it's funny, I was checking up on Esparza the other day when I was doing research. She'd fought a common opponent, and I was like, what the fuck's she doing with her life these days, man? And she's had a kid and whatnot. And I think the UFC let her go. Or she like retired or something. But she was disputing that, saying that, you know, she's not retired and she's waiting for a fight. But anyway, yeah, Perez, man, he struggled making weight in the past. His weight cuts aren't the best. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see fucking Ryan Spann headlining this against Guskov, man, and this fight gets scrapped, to be honest. But yeah, in terms of the fight, Nicolau, he has a major advantage in the jiu-jitsu. I believe Alex is going to take it there stupidly, and he's going to get himself submitted, man. I think Nicolau's for real. And yeah, he's going to prove it once again. Probably a finish within 3 rounds, and specifically the submission. And the last thing I'll mention is, man, I don't know about you, but I can't believe people are high on Cape. He's poor to me. Yeah, people are really high on him for some reason, think he's the next champ contender. I'm glad he pulled out of this fight. I wouldn't care if I never saw him fight again, to be honest. I think he's pretty basic, to be honest. But yeah, that's my pick, man. Nicolau, submission, plus 300, plus 400, depending on your book.
Fair enough. So listen, man, I like Matheus Nicolau. I think that he has like a fatal flaw as a fighter, which is his chin. I just think that like there's something that's off about the way he takes shots. I've never liked it. I've always been a little bit concerned by that. And, you know, obviously Perez is not known for being like a fucking one-shot knockout power puncher or something. So maybe that's not a huge concern here. But for me, the thing that kind of stood out about this is both guys seem like they're gearing up for 25 minutes. You know, like when you think about a Matheus Nicolau, what is his upside from this fight? Like if you go out there and beat Alex Perez, like we did just see with Mokayev, like, hey, he went out there and got the decision, so it didn't get him the immediate title shot, right? Urseg knocks out Matt Schnell, who's a lot easier to finish, and he gets the title shot. So you kind of see the way the UFC likes to market and promote these things. Obviously, they like finishes, but a lot of times with the fighters, you see that like from a career development, from a fight development standpoint, these guys like to get like, you know, some experience, right? They like to get the 25 minutes in. You know, we see them, you know, take their time over these longer fights. And especially in the flyweight division, man, I was a little bit surprised to see this so heavily chalked to end inside the distance. Now, flyweight fights tend to be like insane pace and like both guys going after it, crazy scrambles and all that stuff. This fight, I feel, could take 2 different paths, right? Like maybe somebody tries to assert their grappling dominance, in which case, like, I think the finishing upside then shoots through the roof. Like in terms of the likelihood that somebody gets finished, like if it's on the mat, I think that goes way up because I think Perez is a guy that the way you beat him in terms of submission grappling is like transitional finishes. Like I actually think his wrestling in that last fight, he proved me wrong in terms of, I thought he was going to get out wrestled pretty summarily. And I know I agree with you that Mokayev was compromised, but still like I know technique from wrestling and like he was giving up some like, you know, peek outs and like nasty moves from Mokayev, but like for the most part, he was really shutting down his fucking like entries. And he knew, like when I mentioned it before, I said the anticipation for Lipski has gotten better. The anticipation is off the fucking charts for Alex Perez. That's why his wrestling's so good. He said, I wrestle with these high school kids, and I could tell, like you could just see it in his timing and his reactions that he is really adept at like timing and down blocking and moving when people wrestle with him. So the times he's gotten beat, if you remember, Davison Figueiredo, dude, like he literally hit the fucking nastiest like cutback sweep, fucking like dropped to a leg, attacked his ankle, went for a heel hook, and then like as Perez rolled out of that exchange, he grabbed a hold of the front headlock and just finished him. It was fucking brilliant. Like Davison Figueiredo, UFC 300, that fight, all of it, hats off to the guy. He's just an insane martial artist. But then you look at, you know, a guy like Matheus Nicolau, he's got a great skill set, but he's very passive a lot of times in his fights. He's skirting around the octagon. He's moving backwards. He kind of just like invites his opponent to come forward. Even against Makhachev, like Perez was coming forward the whole time. It's just that Makhachev continuously level changed into the hips, but a lot of times that wasn't going anywhere. So it was like level change into the hips, and then like Perez is like on him, like just like throwing a couple short shots or like pressing against the hips and like trying to keep him away. And I felt like Perez let a lot of opportunities go. I felt like he was starting to come on strong later in the fight and then still didn't like close strong. So like he put on like 25, 30 seconds of great pressure and then gave up the back take with like 10 seconds left. And I was just like, optics, bro, optics. You just lost the fight right there.
Do you know why, bro?
Please go ahead.
Because he was just showing up for that fight. He couldn't believe his luck that Makhachev was, you know, compromised shit that day. He got lucky, man.
Yeah, I think that's possible. But the other thing is, when I try and consider, you know, what could be the downsides for Nicolau, I think number one, he could get clipped in the pocket. I think number two, he's a guy that spends a lot of time circling around the outside and trying to use his own boxing, right? Like he doesn't use his kicks all that often. And so if he's going to try and box with Perez, I think Perez could meet him with the boxing a little bit. I also think that Perez has good low kicks. Like that is like one of his assets, his skills, his tools. And I always say the last thing to leave range, like Henry Cejudo showed this against Dominic Cruz, like, all right, you want to fucking move away from me all night? I'll just punt the last leg that's there as much as I can and see if I can take you out of your stance and off balance you. So I think that that's another path, right? It's like I could see paths for Perez to win this fight. And I could also see like a clear way that this fight goes the distance. Like I could just see both these guys kind of, you know, being a little bit passive at times, you know, not wanting to test each other's wrestling and grappling too much. They both have like a friendly relationship. I don't know if you heard this, Rich, but like, what's his name was saying like, yeah, this guy's been to my house before. Like, yeah, he's got a friend, like a guy who lives with me. That's like one of his best friends. So those are the things where just like, they seem to have like a friendly enough professional relationship. And I like, they're not like fucking best friends and like, you know, nothing like that, but just, it feels to me like we could get like a sparring vibe at the Apex between these two guys. So I saw some sharp people on the over. I think that makes some sense here. I did consider it.
I bet the under.
See, the thing is like, I think that you're expecting a grappling based fight. And a grappling based fight, I think that you've kind of nailed the way that I would expect it to go down. It's like, I think Perez would probably be the one who's way more likely to get submitted. I think he's just got worse grappling fundamentals, but I think the wrestling is where it becomes a little bit harder for Nicolau. I'm not as confident that he could wrestle him, you know, with consistency here, but maybe he could rock him and then take him down. Like I've said before,
Perez.
Yeah.
I don't think he'll even try.
So that,
I think
that's the thing. That's the thing that's hard for me is like, if Perez is not wrestling here, like if he's not attempting takedowns, I think it's going to be a low volume, low tempo kickboxing match that's hard to score. And I think that if that's the case, like Perez is a guy that can win a decision here, but it's just a guy that hasn't been 25 minutes in a really long time. So that is what's scary for me is like, he's a guy that is like, he's been scheduled for 25 minutes a few times, right? He's had title fight opportunities and stuff. I'm sure he's put in the camps before, and he probably wouldn't have taken this if he didn't think he had some opportunity to win it. But it's like, it also could just be, hey, you know, my win here is making it 25 minutes, you know, going out there, getting another paycheck, mitigating damage, and then getting another fight. Because I think he said he wanted to try and fight again on the June date that he was supposed to do already. So just like, I think Perez is like trying to stay active, and I do think that's to his benefit, man. Like you can't be successful in the UFC if you're not fighting. You know, that like, then you have to be really careful with your matchmaking. And I think that both these guys are going to be cautious. Like I would not be surprised if we see a pretty tepid round one, but as soon as somebody gets hurt, like it could be the change of the fight. Like the other thing is Matheus Nicolau's chin is so bad, in my opinion, that the under always makes sense in his fights. Like if you look going into the Royval fight, him and Nicolau had like opposite trends, which was like Nicolau trended towards the over and Royval trended heavily towards the under. Royval won the fight, right? So it's like he finished it fucking right in the first round. And that is like contingent with what has been his historical trend. So there's the interesting notes there. Rich, my brother, what do you have for the people? Closing thoughts, any final things that you want to get off your chest, brother?
Nah, not really. Bit of a mid card. The one next week is a banger, man. Already got some bets on mine up for that one. But yeah, if you want to get my bets, cost you $3. Link in the bio on Twitter, man. Join the Patreon and all that good stuff.
Hell yeah. I want to just answer this question. MetaHuman says, didn't Nicolau get KO'd by a knee? Not really a bad chin. He got KO'd by a knee. He got KO'd by punches, I believe, by Pedro Nobre back in the day. And he also got KO'd by Dustin Ortiz via head kick. He blocked that head kick, guys. If you go back and watch it, he has his guard fully up. He gets kicked on his guard, and he still went down in that spot. He also got hurt in the Manel Cap fight. I want to answer as well as I give my sign off here what Rich had said about Cap. I'm not like Cap is like the future of the division in every way, especially the fact that the guy can never make it to a fight. He can never make weight. He can never sign on the dotted line and be reliable. A bunch of things that they want from a guy who's going to fight for a title. But I did think that he was going to beat Nicolau in the rematch. And I had bet Nicolau plus money the first time they fought, Rich. So that was what was funny to me. It's like, I was like, damn, I'm going to have to pass on this because Cap is like minus 200. And I thought he was going to win the fight. And last time I bet Nicolau like plus 105. And I was happy to just get out of there with the bet. I was like, oh, thank you. Thank you. But it was really close. But in any case, there you have it, guys. There is Bets and Banter for UFC Vegas 91. We're back for a pay-per-view next week, UFC 301, so you won't want to miss it. Make sure you get subscribed. Drop a like if you don't mind. If you're looking to support the sponsor of today's program, Fight Numbers, all the information is down in the description box below, the link as well. You use my promo code Liam. They're going to hook you up with a nice discount. And that's basically all we got for you today, guys. I've got clips coming to the channel. I got timestamps coming to this video. I've got podcasts coming out as well. We have the podcast for First Look already posted up. I'm going to have the podcast of this show as well posted up for you guys. Trying to be more on top of it with the content this week. So we're back. We got 9 out of 10 weeks, I believe, coming up with UFC events. A lot of great fights to talk about. So make sure you don't miss them. Make sure that you're here. Sharpest chat in the game, guys. It would not be the same show without all of you guys. So thank you for the comments. Thank you for the questions and the concern. If you guys have anything more that you haven't heard from us, go ahead and drop those down in the comment section down below, and I'll make sure I address those as well. Rich, did you have something you wanted to add?
No. Shall I give out a big pick for next week?
Hey, if you got something, I'm sure the people wouldn't mind.
Okay. I'm fading Pantoja, so people can tell me how stupid I am in the chat.
Hey, I don't mind it. I'll tell you this. I got to be a little bit judicious with how I say this, but I had an opportunity to try and bet on Urseg to be champion by the end of the year at like a really nice number. And I tried to like pull a couple strings to get it done. And unfortunately, the line dropped off a cliff. Like I saw the announcement, I tried to bet it, and then I wasn't able to get it in on time. And I saw in real time, it went from 30-1 down to 10-1. Down to 4-1. I mean, dude, now you got to think like the guy's fucking plus 200 in the title fight. So it's like they clearly had like the worst, like the most insane price of all time. So I really tried to finesse them, and they finessed me instead. But we'll get the bookmakers still. I think that is a live underdog for sure. Urseg is a guy. I looked into him a little bit. I don't have as full a breakdown or anything, but what I could say is he looks like a guy who's been wrestling for a long time, grappling for a long time. And if he can keep this fight upright, it's going to be a very competitive fight. The one danger I would say is he is a very upright striker. Pantoja throws a lot of overhand rights. I think that is his path on the feet. He throws with a lot of like reckless intention in the pocket. And if he's able to get the fight to the ground, I mean, we saw with Alex Perez, right? I noted how good his defense wrestling looked against Makhachev. The problem is he does the standing back take thing where he like lets people take his back standing because he's confident, hey, I can fight grips, I can do these things. Against Pantoja, you do that one time, you might get fucking submitted, right? Like that's what happened to Perez in that fight. Like one time he showed his back and then he jumps on his fucking back and finishes the fight. So that's the kind of thing where I think Pantoja, dangerous guy, lethal guy, but minus 250, Even in Brazil, that's tough. That's tough. So
Oh,
great
it's not
fight,
Rio,
right?
Brazil. It's in the shit part of Brazil, man.
We're in Rio. The king of Rio is fucking coming back.
I was in
Jose
Rio.
Aldo. Indeed.
I read it wrong. My bad. My bad.
No worries. But yeah, I think that's great. Astro Boy is fighting on May the 4th day, aka Star Wars Day. Wow, subtle, interesting.
Star Wars Day.
Narrative Nation is already in the building. Well, there you have it, guys. God bless you all. I hope that you all enjoy those fights. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Thank you to our chat. Thank you to Rich for being here. Thank you to each and every one of you guys who support the show. If you want more information from me, it's on the Patreon. It's down in the link below, and it's right back to work for me. So thanks, everybody. Take care. We'll talk to you guys soon.